President Biden is speaking out for the first time since CBS News learned roughly 10 documents marked classified were found at his former office in Washington. His comments come as Republicans on the House Oversight Committee move quickly to investigate. Adriana Diaz has more.
In Mexico City today, President Biden addressed questions about his management of classified materials.
What's in the documents? My lawyers have not suggested I ask what documents they were. I've turned over the boxes. They've turned over the boxes to the archives, and we're cooperating fully.
This comes one day after CBS News was first to report that roughly 10 documents marked classified from his time as vice president were discovered on November 2nd. They were inside this building, 10 blocks from the White House, where Biden had an office after his vice presidency. A source tells CBS News the documents, which were found inside a box in a locked closet, had multiple levels of classification and included highly classified material. Today, the Republican-led House Oversight Committee announced it's launching an investigation and asked the White House for all documents retrieved from President Biden's personal office and a list of who had access to that office. The inquiry is drawing comparisons to the investigation into former President Trump's handling of classified documents. In that case, more than 300 were recovered from Mar-a-Lago last year after Trump resisted multiple requests to turn them over. CBS's Robert Costa spoke to former Vice President Mike Pence.
When the American people see President Biden receiving one form of treatment with the discovery of classified documents that were retained after he left the office of the vice president, and they see President Trump treated in an entirely different way, again, the handling of classified materials is a very serious issue for our nation, and we ought to take it seriously. But there ought to be equal treatment under the law.
A source tells CBS News that the Justice Department's review, led by U.S. Attorney John Lausch, a Trump appointee, is largely done, but there are still inquiries about whether any classified documents might be at other locations. Today, former President Trump questioned why didn't the Justice Department announce the highly classified documents found in the Biden office before the election. Democrats pushed back against any wrongdoing by Mr. Biden.
Should the discovery of President Biden's classified documents been disclosed before the midterms?
What President Biden did was disclose this to the archives, let law enforcement know. That is exactly the way that you should handle this.
Republicans have also asked the Director of National Intelligence for a damage assessment to see if any national security secrets were exposed. The incoming chairman of the House Intelligence Committee said Biden could be in violation of the Presidential Records Act and the Espionage Act. John?
Adriana Diaz, thank you. I want to bring in Mark Zaid. He's a national security attorney, and we should note, Mark, that you're representing the longtime girlfriend of the late Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick in a wrongful death lawsuit against former President Trump. So, Mark, you tweeted that in the Biden case that it should and will be investigated. What are the key investigative questions, and what laws may President Biden have run afoul of?
Well, there are provisions within the Espionage Act in Title 18, 793, 798 sections, which is in the weeds, that come into play, just as with Mar-a-Lago. And the investigation by this one of only two Trump-appointed U.S. attorneys in Chicago, as was mentioned, they'll look into predominantly how did the records get there, who had access to them, was there any type of compromise, and explore that type of avenue. It may be, if you want to take extreme situations, we could come up with a scenario where President Biden, as vice president, brought them there himself and hid them in the closet. Or it could be that Vice President Biden at no time ever saw or knew of these documents. And those facts will determine whether or not there's any criminal culpability.
And does it matter if then Vice President Biden was the one who carried these documents or didn't? In other words, does the buck not stop at the senior person who had the clearance to look at those documents? Are they not responsible for handling them, or how they're handled?
If he knew that they were there, right? Look, no one, I don't think, reasonably believes President Trump carried the documents down to Mar-a-Lago. I don't think anyone believes he put them in the different closets that they were, or even moved them perhaps up to his office. But there's factual evidence in the Trump case that he did tell people to do that he knew there were classified records still in his possession, even after the archives, the Department of Justice, and FBI had asked for them. So from a political standpoint, President Biden may have to do a mea culpa and say, look, I'm the president, I take responsibility. It is always sensitive and significant when classified information is mishandled, as appears to have been the case. But criminal culpability is completely a separate issue.
And help us from slipping into false equivalence, or maybe tell us that they're exactly equivalent in these two cases between what is known, and we don't know the full picture on the Biden front, but what is known about what's happened with Joe Biden and the documents that were found at Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah, these cases, this is apples and oranges, completely different, other than perhaps having the documents in possession when they shouldn't have. But President Biden and his lawyers went directly to the archives, who directly retrieved them, versus Mar-a-Lago, where we had about a year and a half of back and forths and delays and obstruction, and now evidence factually that President Trump himself was personally involved in withholding this information from the FBI. The comments that we heard previously before I came on from members of Congress and President Trump and Vice President Pence, that's political swing. That is not the law. That is not policy. That is not practice. And people, I hope, will pay attention to the differences between what is the law and policy and practice and what is partisan political diatribes that they're going to be pushing from both sides.
Mark, what do you make of the difference in classification levels? We don't know the level of classification with the Biden documents, but with former President Trump, they are the highest level of classification. Will that matter in the Biden case?
It always matters with respect to doing the damage assessment, for sure. And news reports have said that some of these, as you did, some of these are some of the highest classified documents, I presume at TSSCI, what we call. With the Trump case, there were some media reports that there was formally restricted data, which is Energy Department nuclear secrets, that actually President Trump no president has any authority to declassify, which is significant to the arguments that he has tried to publicly make. There have been news reports that there are no nuclear secrets within these 10 documents found at the Biden Center, but it all does appear, again, from just what we know, and we know very little, that these are highly classified. But it will come down to, did they stay in the closet the entire time?
And just very briefly, what do you make of Attorney General Merrick Garland's appointment of John Lausch, who is a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney? That's obviously key. What do you read into that?
It's a smart political move. It shouldn't have any impact from a legal standpoint. And the unfortunate is, if it stays factually the way it is, most of these cases are only handled administratively. They rarely go into criminal penalties. So I would expect, if the things stay, that's it. But politically, this is, unfortunately, we're going to be hearing this for quite a while.
Yes, indeed. Mark Zaid, thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure.